What is up, guys? It's me, the ALE Double X Prince, and here's another failed champions. Why did Jack Swaggle fail as World Heavyweight Champion? Before I get started, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but a few of you have been asking if you would ever do failed champions for the women or the tag team division, and I thought about it because I've mainly only gone to world champions, and a lot of them have happen to be the same answer, like oh they weren't the main focus or stuff like that, and I think yeah, I could think about doing failed mid card champions, failed like women's champions, something like that. I could do stuff like that, but I don't know because IC champions. I don't know. There's a lot of failed IC champions. Albert, Billy Gunn, Road Dogg. Like some people were just like transitional champions. Like they were meant to hold the belt for like 3 days. So I could see why I would skip those, but um I'll think about it, but I want to do one of world heavyweight champions, and here is the next one. Jack Swagger. So Jack Swagger was, let's just start way before he was even close to the world title. So he started off in ECW, made a name for himself, was a two-time ECW champion, mind you. Yeah, I believe he won it twice, the ECW champion. But around this time, the ECW belt was dead. It took Christian, of all people, to save that brand. And he did for a good 2009. Honestly, Christian in 2009 was fantastic. Was easily like the top players of 2009 were honestly CM Punk, Jeff Hardy, and Christian. Those three. And okay, Punk, Hardy, Jericho, and Christian. Like that's how great Christian was. Because Jericho was also great. But anyways, that's not the point. The ECW run and for Jack Swagger was pretty pathetic around this time. ECW was pretty pathetic, if you might ask me. Then he moved over to Raw, where he was basically a mid carder once again, kind of almost a jobber. He was barely on TV, and when he was just like irrelevant. He's just like the doofus smiling. Remember that? And then he happened to qualify for Money in a Bank, and I was like, okay, maybe we could see something out of Jack Swagger. And I'm not gonna lie, his entrance attire for his gear for WrestleMania 26 is super iconic. It actually looks pretty fucking cool, if you ask me. It was a mix of like Kurt Angle, with a little mix of I'm trying to think of a good like person wearing a singlet, but like yeah, it kind of reminded you of Kurt Angle, and I was like, okay, I want to see what he's capable of. And that entire match, he was barely on the match. He got his ass kicked for most of it, and then when he went to go reach the briefcase, he took forever to take it off. And I remember the number one reason why he even failed as Mr. Money in the Bank is because he took for other he took so long to get the briefcase. That's number one. And number two is that there was other people who were red hot around this time who were who had more TV time than he did, and they gave it to this guy. Keep in mind, when I went to Raw live, this was around the time of WrestleMania 26 season, and Jack Swagger was on Superstars. You could go check that out if you think I'm making this up. But yeah, Jack Swagger was on Superstars, and now 2 weeks later, he's Mr. Money in a Bank. Get the fuck out of here. But um, he cashes in on Chris Jericho after getting his ass kicked by Edge, and it was like, okay, he's the world champion. Now what's next? Now, before I tell you what was wrong with him as a world champion, let me tell you some stuff that I gotta be honest. For starters, he actually didn't look bad holding the world title. Like if you actually see him in pictures, like he actually looked legit. The problem was we don't know who Jack Swagger was at this point because he was barely on TV prior to being the world champion, let alone Mr. Money in a Bank. Uh, and The biggest downfall of Jack Swagger's entire career was his mic skills. This man can't speak for shit. Like that's why in Jake Hager he never speak as Jake Hager in AEW. That's why he never speaks because he sounds like this and he has the lisp, and it's so fucking annoying. So we weren't ready for him, and the number one thing you made him do was talk. And trust me, he was fucking annoying when he talked. And I gotta give him props for one thing. When he lost the world title, he was still irrelevant for a good portion of the show. It took maybe until like the end of the year to like completely put him in jobber status, but for the most part, Jack Swagger, they tried. They actually gave him credibility. They gave him TV time. They did everything. Like it wasn't like Jinder Mahal where he lost the world title, they regret it, and they just made him a full-fledged jobber. Like I gotta give WWE props that they do that. Like even though they were maybe proud or happy with the result, they at least kept these people relevant. Like there was a lot of guys back in the day that never deserved the world title, but they kept them relevant, and that is what was important. Like Shinsuke Nakamura went from the Royal Rumble winner to a pre-show jobber. Like that is disappointing. It kind of makes you happy that he never became WWE champion. But back to Jack Swagger. One of the biggest things you should never do when booking a world champion is have him lose all the damn time. He lost to The Undertaker. He lost to Big Show prior to facing him at Over the Limit. And hell, he even lost to John Morrison. You could actually check this out. Like, he actually lost to John Morrison. Now, naturally, in your head, you're like, oh shit, Jack Swagger's next opponent will be Jack Swagger. I mean, Jack Swagger's next opponent will be John Morrison. So, that's what we all thought was going to happen. Instead, John Morrison gets drafted to Raw, so there was no one really for him to face on SmackDown. Sure enough, they went with the Big Show, who was red hot from KO punching The Miz, Chris Jericho, Edge, everybody. So now naturally you have to have Jack Swagger go after a guy who, I mean, if he couldn't beat John Morrison, what made you think he had a chance against the Big Show? Like size wise, it really pushed him down. Uh, Another thing that really went wrong with Jack Swagger, plain and simple, he was barely in the main events. In the main event, I think if you're around this time, there wasn't no women's revolution. The tag team division wasn't killing it. So naturally, if you're the world champion, that means you're the front and center of the entire show. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the front and center of the Attitude Era. The Rock, Triple H. Let's go with some SmackDown guys. Batista, um, Edge, Chris Jericho. Like those guys were the front and center of the show. Jeff Hardy, CM Punk, like I said. And it seemed like everybody else was more relevant than Jack Swagger. Punk and Mysterio's feud was red hot on SmackDown. Freaking Jericho and Edge before they left to Raw. Like, even this is crazy. I couldn't believe they did this. They got rid of all of the SmackDown top players, put him on Raw, gave us a bunch of jobbers on SmackDown, and Jack Swagger was still irrelevant. And if you don't believe me, go to Extreme Rules, Wikipedia, Extreme Rules 2010. Jack Swagger was the fourth match on the show, and there was still four more matches to go on this show. Now, at the time, you didn't really have to be in the main event per se to be a credible world title match, but you were either the co-main event or like hell, if you were the opening world title match at the time, it sucked being you. It really did. Which was which honestly it never happened other than Alberto Del Rio versus Edge at WrestleMania 27. That was the first time it ever happened. This is 2010, and Jack Swagger was like way down on the card, and he was facing Randy Orton. Now, to its fairness, Jack Swagger isn't a bad wrestler. He's honestly a very underrated wrestler. He could go like he had a good match with Randy Orton, but they never give him some opponents that could make you like him. Uh or give him a chance to shine as a credible champion. Like, if you're gonna be the world champion, I think for starters you need to face some credible people. Which, out of maybe honestly, out of all the failed champions I've done thus far, Jack Swagger's had the most credible opponents. Look at this list: Randy Orton, Jericho, Edge, Big Show, Rey Mysterio. Like, those are some pretty big names. Uh, Compared to freaking Seth Rollins, Baron Corbin, shit, Lacey Evans, like, goddamn. But Jack Swagger wasn't that bad in the ring. He could actually work these matches. Honestly, when he fought Alberto Del Rio for the world title at Mania 29, I don't think the match should have been for the world title, but I also think that he was more credible then, and that's another thing that made Jack Swagger fail. His gimmick was, what was it? Like, he was just the world champion and all American. Like, even Americans don't act like this. This is like it wasn't even like a stereotypical white dude. It was just a dude who just happens to be a world champion, and he's kind of a goof, and like it was just so stupid. Like, I remember, like, around this time, it was like he has the look. I could see why Vince at the time had a boner for Jack Swagger, but at the same time, you're thinking to yourself, why did they push him too hard? Like, and this is one of the biggest problems with WWE today. Instead of wanting to build someone up from the bottom, pick him all the way, him or her all the way up, they put him immediately in the world title picture. They did it with The Miz, they did it with Sheamus, they did it with Jinder Mahal. So why was Jack Swagger the thought of, like, what made them say, yeah, let's push this guy all the way to the top? I've always wondered, like, what was the idea as to, like, wanting to make Jack Swagger the world champion. Like, and I get it, JBL, he miraculously was at the right place at the right time, became WWE champion, became the longest reigning SmackDown champion, and he made it work, and he was still relevant to this day. um and Jack Swagger, when people look at Jack Swagger, they go, holy shit, that guy was a world champion. Oh yeah, that I felt a lot of you people clicked on this and were like, oh shit, like, was Jack Swagger a world champion? But yeah. So the biggest flop for Jack Swagger is that, one, he wasn't ready. Two, he really didn't have a character. Three, he kept losing. And four, he just didn't know who Jack Swagger was. No one really knew who he was. Um, now we know him as Jake Hager from AEW, a MMA fighter. We know him from We the People, but before all of that, he was a world champion. Imagine if we gotten We the People world champion. Imagine if we got MMA world champion. That would have made more sense. But we made Jack Swagger a champion before he became a name, like someone to relevancy. Like, Mr. Kennedy was gonna be a WWE champion at one point, but he had a character and something to get excited for. It wasn't like one of those things where it's like, oh fuck, do we really want to make him a world champion? No, we were like, okay, let's go for it. Let's see where we go with Mr. Kennedy. Unfortunately, he failed a drug test, and similar to Jack Swagger, the difference is that Jack Swagger was a world champion and he's still irrelevant. So, anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's me, the ALE Double X Prince, and until then, I'm out.